Susan had one rule in Seoul: stay invisible, stay safe, carry the secret, and let no one close enough to find it. And she had kept that rule for 11 months until the night Nam Jae-won came home early and found her in his bathroom and looked at her like she was the answer to a question he had stopped letting himself ask. She knew what he was. She had read the headlines, seen the way men moved out of his path like water around stone. What he did not know was that she was carrying something that had already cost her everything once. And if he ever found out, she was certain it would cost her everything again. Welcome to Black and Soul TV. Please like, share, and subscribe. Susan Adeyemi had not planned on becoming a maid. She had been a schoolteacher in Lagos, then a wife, then a mother of 2 boys who called her name in the mornings and made her feel like her life had a shape worth keeping. Then the diagnosis came. 4 words from a doctor who could not even look her in the eye. And after those 4 words, everything else fell apart. Her husband Michael sat across from her at the kitchen table 3 weeks later and told her he could not do it. He said he still loved her, but the look on his face said something different. He took the boys. He took the house. He took the version of her life she had spent 12 years building. Susan packed 2 bags, flew to South Korea on a work visa arranged by a cousin, and told herself she was starting over. She told herself the secret she carried was hers alone. Nobody needed to know. Nobody ever would. She found work through a domestic staffing agency in Seoul. The pay was good. The hours were long. Most of her clients were wealthy professionals who barely looked at her. She preferred it that way. Invisible was safe. Invisible meant no questions. She cleaned apartments in Gangnam during the week and a luxury high-rise complex on weekends. The high-rise was different from the others. The security was heavier. The elevator required a key card for the upper floors. The staffing agency told her simply that the penthouse client valued discretion above everything else, and that she was never to speak to him directly unless he spoke first. She signed the agreement without asking questions. She needed the money. She always needed the money. The first time she cleaned the penthouse, he was not home. She moved through the vast apartment like a ghost, noting the sparse but expensive furnishings, the framed architectural drawings on the walls, the single child's drawing taped above a desk in the study, a crayon sun above 2 stick figures, one tall and one small, holding hands. She stared at that drawing for a long moment before moving on. The second time she came, she arrived early. Her schedule said 9 in the morning. She let herself in with the staff access code and went straight to the master bathroom, which always took the most time. She had her headphones in, music low, on her knees with the scrub brush when the door opened behind her. She pulled out one earbud and turned, and there he was. Nam Jae-won was not what she expected. She had imagined an older man, perhaps heavy, the kind of wealthy who wore his power like extra weight. Instead, he was tall and lean, broad across the shoulders, with a jaw that looked like it had been carved from something harder than bone. He was wrapped in a towel and nothing else. Water ran down his collarbone. His eyes were very dark and very still, and they were fixed entirely on her. She scrambled to her feet and yanked out both earbuds. She opened her mouth to apologize, but no words came. He just looked at her, not with anger, not with irritation, with something slower and more unreadable than either of those things. "You are early," he said finally. His voice was low, unhurried. "I am so sorry, sir. I can come back. I will come back." She was already reaching for her bucket. "No." He stepped aside to let her pass. "Finish. I will use the other bathroom." That was all. He turned and walked away, and Susan stood there for 3 full seconds before her legs remembered how to work. That night, she lay in her small rented room and told herself it meant nothing. He was a client. She was staff. She had rules to follow and a secret to protect, and absolutely no business thinking about the way he had looked at her like she was the most interesting thing he had seen in years. She went back the following weekend, and the one after that. The 3rd week, he was in the kitchen when she arrived. He was making coffee, dressed in a dark suit, his posture the kind of straight that comes from a lifetime of never being allowed to slouch. He glanced at her when she entered. "You take yours black," he said. It was not a question. There was a second cup on the counter. She stopped. "How did you know that?" "I pay attention." He pushed the cup toward her and picked up his own. "You worked 3 hours overtime last Saturday. Your agency does not compensate for that. I have arranged that it will going forward." She did not know what to say to that either. She picked up the cup. The coffee was perfect. She learned his name not from him, but from the news. One evening she was scrolling through her phone, and a headline appeared with his photograph. She recognized the jaw first. Nam Jae-won, it read, alongside words she had to translate slowly. Powerful. Influential. Connected to organizations. The article described in careful, circling language that never said outright what it meant, but left no real doubt. She sat with the phone in her hands for a long time. Then she put it down and did not search further. She told herself it was none of her business. She told herself that again on Saturday morning when she arrived at the penthouse and found a small envelope on the kitchen counter with her name written on it in precise handwriting. Inside was a gift card to the Korean grocery near her apartment and a single line on a notepad page. You mentioned the prices were difficult. This neighborhood has better options. She had mentioned that once. Offhandedly. To the air, practically, while she was wiping down the counter and he was passing through the hallway. He had not even appeared to be listening. She did not return the gift card. Has Nam Jae-won seen love again? And does he know the untold secret that comes with it? Hit that subscribe button and stay tuned. A few days later, she arrived to find a little girl sitting at the kitchen counter eating cereal. The child was perhaps 7 or 8, with her father's serious dark eyes and her hair in 2 puffy pigtails that someone had attempted and only partially succeeded with. She looked at Susan without shyness. You are the weekend lady, the girl said. I am, Susan said. And you are? Hone. My papa says I can stay up because school is canceled. She tilted her head. Are you from Africa? Nigeria, Susan said. West Africa. Hone considered this with great seriousness. My teacher says Africa is very big. Your teacher is right. Nam Jae-won appeared in the doorway behind his daughter. He looked at Susan for a brief moment, and something in his expression shifted. Not much, just enough for her to notice. Hone, he said. Let her work. She is not working yet, Papa. We are talking. The girl looked at Susan. Do you want more cereal? There is extra. Susan almost smiled. She did not mean to, but it happened. I am fine. Thank you. She could feel him watching her as she moved to the other room. She kept her back very straight and her expression very professional. It took effort. The following Saturday, Hone was at a friend's house, and the penthouse was quiet. Susan was folding laundry in the hallway when Nam Jae-won came and leaned against the opposite wall, arms folded, watching her in that unhurried way he had. You worked in education, he said. Before. She paused. The agency told you that? No. The way you spoke to Hone. You teach without trying. He paused. What brought you to Seoul? It was the question she had been outrunning for months. She folded a shirt carefully before answering. A fresh start. From something painful. From several things. He did not push. That surprised her. Men like him, in her experience, pushed. He simply nodded as though she had given him a complete answer, and then he said, Hone asked if you could braid hair. She wants to learn. Susan looked up. She asked you that. She tells me everything. He said it simply, without any particular expression, but something in the words was tender. He was a man who had clearly decided that his daughter telling him everything was one of the better things life had given him. I told her I would ask. Susan looked back at the laundry. I can show her sometime. If you like. She will like. He pushed off the wall. Thank you, Susan. It was the first time he had used her name. She stood very still after he walked away, holding a folded towel, and breathed carefully through her nose. Later that evening, she walked to the Han River and sat by the water for a long time. She thought about Michael. She thought about her sons, who called on video chat every Sunday and asked when she was coming home. And she always said soon, babies, soon, and then spent the rest of Sunday trying not to fall apart. She thought about the diagnosis and the medication she took every morning with a glass of water and the secret she carried like a stone sewn into the lining of her coat, everywhere she went, always. She thought about Nam Jae-won saying her name in that low, unhurried voice and felt afraid in a way she had not expected. She could not let this become anything. She knew what she was. She knew what she carried. A man like him did not need that. A little girl like Hone did not need the confusion of someone like Susan walking in and then being removed when the truth came out. Because the truth always came out. She had learned that the hard way, in a kitchen in Lagos, across a table from a man who had promised her everything and then shown her exactly what that promise was worth the moment she became complicated. She went home. She took her medication. She went to sleep. The next Saturday, she was professional and brisk, and kept every interaction short. Nam Jae-won noticed. She could tell by the slight narrowing of his eyes, the careful way he gave her more space than usual, like a man who understood he had moved too fast and was correcting course. That made it worse somehow, that he was perceptive enough to adjust without needing to be told. Ha-eun had no such restraint. She met Susan at the door with a hairbrush and a hair tie and an expression of absolute determination. "Today," she announced, "you teach me." And that was how Susan ended up sitting on the living room floor for 40 minutes, Ha-eun between her knees, teaching her the basics of a simple 3-strand braid, while Nam Jae-won sat in the armchair nearby, pretending to read documents and not watching them at all. He was absolutely watching them. "Your hands are very gentle," Ha-eun said. "I have 2 boys," Susan said without thinking, then stopped. Ha-eun twisted around to look at her. "You have children? Where are they?" Susan kept her expression steady. "They live with their father." "Do you miss them?" "Every single day." Ha-eun was quiet for a moment. Then she turned back around and sat very still and let Susan finish the braid without asking any more questions, which Susan understood was the child's particular form of kindness. She did not look at Nam Jae-won when she left that afternoon. She could feel him watching her from the doorway all the way to the elevator. A few days later, she received a message through the agency system. The penthouse client had requested her for an additional weekday shift. She stared at the message for a long time. Then she accepted. She arrived on a Wednesday to find the apartment empty except for him. He was at the large dining table covered in papers and blueprints, and his reading glasses were pushed up into his hair, and he looked more human than she had ever seen him. He glanced up when she came in. "There is food in the kitchen," he said. "You have not eaten. It is 2 in the afternoon." She had not told him when she last ate. She went to the kitchen. There was a container of rice and bulgogi still warm from what must have been recent delivery, and a note in his handwriting that said simply, "Eat first." She stood in the kitchen reading that note for longer than was reasonable. She ate. He worked. At some point he came to refill his coffee and stood near her at the counter, close enough that she could smell the faint cedar of whatever he used, and said, "The blueprints on the table are for a community center. Yongsan District. Public commission." He paused. "I am trying to build things now instead of other things." She looked at him. "Other things." His eyes met hers, steady and without deflection. "Yes, other things." The air between them was very still. She looked down at her food. "It sounds like a good project." "It is." He refilled his coffee and went back to the table. That was all. But she thought about it for days afterward. She thought about the way he had said it, the quiet admission in it, the decision in it. She was not naive enough to romanticize what she knew about men like him, but she was honest enough with herself to recognize when someone was trying to become something different. She had seen the opposite enough times to know the difference. The night everything changed started with a phone call. Susan was in the penthouse on a Saturday evening, finishing later than usual because Ha-eun had wanted help with an art project for school, and Nam Jae-won had a meeting to get to and did not want his daughter alone with just the security downstairs. So Susan had stayed. Ha-eun fell asleep on the couch surrounded by glitter and construction paper at 9 o'clock, and Susan was covering her with a blanket when Nam Jae-won came through the door. He stopped when he saw the child asleep. Something in his whole body softened. He crossed the room and stood beside Susan looking down at his daughter, and they were standing very close together in the dim quiet of the living room, and Susan made the mistake of looking up at him at the wrong moment. Or the right one. He was already looking at her. "Thank you," he said softly, "for staying." "She is easy to be with," Susan said. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. "Yes." He was still looking at her. "So are you." She should have stepped back. She did not step back. They stood there in that dim quiet for a moment that lasted too long to be accidental and not long enough to be anything she could name. And then his phone rang and the moment broke. He answered in Korean, his expression shifting immediately back into something harder and more controlled, and Susan picked up her bag and let herself out. She sat in the elevator with her heart, doing something she had not given it permission to do. The following week, he was at the penthouse when another man arrived. Susan recognized him from building security logs as a business associate, a broad-shouldered man named Director Lim who looked at Susan with an appreciation he made no effort to hide. He said something to her in Korean that she did not catch, then switched to accented English, and said she had beautiful eyes and asked if she was free for dinner. She was about to give her polite standard refusal when Nam Jae-won walked in from the study. The temperature in the room dropped approximately 10 degrees. He looked at Director Lim with an expression that was entirely calm and entirely terrifying. He said something in Korean. Very quietly. Director Lim straightened immediately and stopped looking at Susan. The meeting proceeded in the study with the door closed, and when Director Lim left 20 minutes later, he did not glance at Susan at all. Nam Jae-won came back into the kitchen after he was gone. He poured himself a glass of water and did not say anything for a moment. "You did not have to do that," Susan said. He was being disrespectful. "I can handle disrespect." "I know you can." He set down the glass. "I did not do it because I thought you could not. I did it because I did not want to." He looked at her directly. "I did not want to stand there and watch that." The confession landed in the room like something dropped from a height. She looked at him. He looked back. Neither of them pretended they did not understand exactly what he had just said. "Jae-won," she said. It was the first time she had used his name. She had not planned it. It just came out that way, soft and serious. "I know," he said. "I know it is complicated. You do not know how complicated. The secret is about to be uncovered. Would he be able to comprehend or withdraw? Will he stay or will he leave? For the sake of his love and his daughter, let's see if he makes the right decision. Hit that subscribe button and don't miss out." Something shifted in his eyes. He waited. She opened her mouth and closed it again. Not yet. She was not ready. She was not sure she would ever be ready. "I should finish up," she said instead. He did not stop her. But when she left that evening, the weight of what she had not said followed her all the way home. She could not sleep. She lay in her room and stared at the ceiling and thought about what it would mean to tell him. She thought about Michael's face across the kitchen table. She thought about how that had felt. Like being handed back something she had given in good faith and told it was defective. She thought about Haun's small, serious face and how much she had come to love that child over these weeks, and how much it would hurt when this, whatever this was, ended. And it would end. She had to believe it would end because the alternative was sitting with the hope that it would not. And hope was a thing she could not currently afford. She called her youngest son on Sunday. He had lost a tooth. He reported very gravely, and had placed it under his pillow and received 3,000 naira. She told him that was wonderful. She told both boys she loved them more than everything put together. After she hung up, she cried for a little while, quietly, with the lights off. Then she got up. She took her medication. She washed her face. She went to work on Monday, which was a restaurant downtown, not the penthouse, and she was professional and quiet and fine. She was not fine. A few days later, Nam Jae-won sent a message through the agency. Not a shift request this time. A personal number and 3 words below it. "If you want." She saved the number. She did not use it for 4 days. On the 5th day, she sent a single message. "How is Haun's braid holding up?" He replied within minutes. "She redid it herself this morning. It looks like a bird's nest. She is very proud of it." Susan smiled at her phone. She hated that she smiled. She went to the penthouse the following Saturday, and Haun showed her the braid immediately upon arrival, turning in a slow circle so Susan could appreciate it from all angles. It did look like a bird's nest. It was also clearly done with tremendous effort and love, every crooked section a testament to how hard the child had tried. "It is wonderful," Susan said, and meant it. "Papa said the same thing," Haun said. "But I think he was being nice." "Maybe," Susan said. "Or maybe wonderful things do not have to be perfect." Haun considered this with the gravity she brought to most things. "I think you and my papa should be friends," she announced. "Real friends. Not just the cleaning kind." Susan did not look up from unpacking her supplies. "Is that so?" "He smiles more when you are here." The child said it simply, as though reporting a weather observation, then wandered off to find her drawing things, leaving Susan standing in the entryway with that statement settling over her like something she did not know how to put down. He was in the study. She could hear him on a call, his voice low and measured. She went about her work and told herself this was a Saturday like any other Saturday. It was not a Saturday like any other Saturday. He found her in the late afternoon, on the balcony shaking out a small rug. The sky over Seoul was going orange and pink, and the city stretched out below them in every direction. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You usually do not ask." "I am asking now." She turned. He was leaning against the glass door, watching her. "Then ask." "The fresh start you came here for," he said. Was it him? The boy's father? She looked at the city. Partly. Did he hurt you? Not the way you mean. She thought about how to say it. He left. When things got hard. He said he could not handle it, and he left, and he took my children with him, and that was the worst thing anyone has ever done to me. She paused. But I cannot entirely blame him for leaving. What he left because of, that part is not simple. Nothing real is simple. No. She set the rug down over the railing. No, it is not. He was quiet for a moment. Then, whatever it is, whatever the thing he could not handle, I want you to know that I am not him. She turned to look at him then. Really look at him. He was serious and steady and looking at her the way he always did, like she was the most interesting thing in any room, and she felt the stone inside her coat shift and press against her ribs. Jae-won, she said carefully. There is something I have not told you. You do not have to tell me today. I know. She breathed. But I think I want to. He waited. He was very good at waiting. I am HIV positive, she said. I have been for 3 years. I am on treatment. My viral load is undetectable. I am healthy, and I will be healthy if I keep taking my medication, which I do, every day, without exception. She kept her voice level. She had rehearsed this in her head more times than she could count. My husband found out and decided he could not stay. He filed for full custody, and a judge agreed because I was in no position to fight it from here. She stopped. That is the thing I carry. That is why I am careful. That is why I have not let this become anything, whatever this is between us, because I have been told once already that it is too much. And I would rather you know now and decide now than let this go further and have it happen again. Silence. She looked at the city. She could not look at him. She had said the words, and now her heart was somewhere around her knees, and she was waiting for the temperature to change, for the careful retreat, for the version of I think you are remarkable, but he did not say any of those things. He pushed off the glass door and crossed the balcony and stood beside her at the railing. Not touching, just beside her. Undetectable, he said. Yes. Meaning with precautions, the risk to a partner is effectively zero. She looked at him. You know that. I looked it up, he said simply. 3 weeks ago when I realized this was where things were going. I wanted to understand before anything, not after. He paused. I did not know about your specific situation, but I wanted to know, in case. She stared at him. You looked it up 3 weeks ago. I wanted to be prepared. He turned to look at her fully. His expression was very serious. Susan, I am not your ex-husband. I am not a man who leaves when things require more of him. I have failed at many things in my life. Abandoning people who trust me has never been one of them. He paused. I am not going to pretend I do not have questions. I do. But not the kind that change what I already know about you. And I already know enough. She felt something in her chest give way. Not break. Give way. Like a wall that had been holding for a long time and finally decided it did not have to anymore. She did not cry. She had been certain she would cry if this moment ever came. But instead she just stood there looking at him, and feeling something she had not felt in so long, she had almost forgotten the shape of it. Seen. She felt seen. You cannot promise this is simple, she said. I am not promising simple. His hand moved to the railing beside hers, not quite touching. I am promising real. Later that night she sat in the kitchen with Haun while the little girl finished homework and Nam Jae-won was on a call in the study, and Haun looked up from her workbook and said without preamble, Are you going to stay? For tonight, Susan said. Haun shook her head. I mean for always. Susan looked at the child for a long moment. Haun looked back with those serious dark eyes that saw everything and asked for nothing except honesty. I do not know yet, Susan said. But I am not running. Haun seemed to find this acceptable. She went back to her homework. The weeks that followed were not without difficulty. There were conversations, careful and honest, questions from him that she answered without flinching, information shared in the quiet of the apartment after Haun was asleep. There were nights where she lay awake and the old fear crawled back and whispered to her that this was too good, that she was too complicated, that he would eventually find the weight of it too heavy. And there were mornings where she took her medication and looked at herself in the mirror and said out loud that she was still here, she was still well, she was allowed to want things. Haun continued to treat the situation as entirely settled, which helped. She had taken to leaving little drawings on the kitchen counter for Susan on Saturday mornings. Stick figures. A tall one, a small one, and a round one with curly hair. Susan kept every single one. Then the danger came, as it always did in his world. She was leaving the building on a Thursday evening when two men she did not recognize fell into step on either side of her. She knew immediately, in the visceral way that the body knows before the mind catches up, that this was not coincidence. One of them leaned close and said Nam Jae-won's name, and then said a message she was supposed to carry back to him, and then they stepped away into the crowd and were gone. She stood on the pavement with her heart slamming against her ribs and called him. He answered immediately. By the second sentence his voice had changed entirely. Stay exactly where you are. Do not move. A black car appeared in under 4 minutes. His second in command, a sharp-faced man named Woo Sung-min who she had seen at the apartment once, got out and put her in the car without a word and drove her back to the penthouse. Nam Jae-won was already there. He took one look at her face and crossed the room and put both hands on her shoulders. Are you hurt? No. Her voice was steady. She was proud of that. Tell me everything, they said. She told him. His expression did not change, but something behind his eyes went very cold in a way she had seen before, only at a distance, only directed at others. The wall between his two selves, the man she knew and the man the city feared, was very thin right now, and she understood in that moment exactly what she was standing next to. Haun is at school, he said. I have already called additional security. She will be escorted home. He looked at Susan. You will stay here tonight. Jae-won. Please. That one word, quiet and deliberate from a man who did not say please often. I need you here where I can see that you are safe. She stayed. That night after Haun was home, and in bed and the apartment was full of quiet security personnel, she pretended not to see. Nam Jae-won sat across from her at the kitchen table and told her the truth about what was happening. A rival organization that had been pressing against his territory for months. Warnings that had escalated. His attempts to manage it through negotiation failing. He told her all of it, and she sat and listened, and when he was done she said, What are you going to do? End it, he said. Properly. Which means giving them what they want and getting out. He paused. I have been building toward this for a long time. The legitimate business is solid enough to sustain. The community center project alone is enough work to absorb the transition. I was always going to do this. He looked at her. You did not cause it, but you made me less willing to wait. Because of Haun, she said. Because of both of you. She looked at the table, then at him. I am scared, she said. So am I. Good, she said. That means we are paying attention. The months that followed were complicated in ways she had not fully anticipated. There were meetings she was not part of and calls that happened behind closed doors in a period of 3 weeks where he was tense and clipped and barely home. And she did not ask because she understood that there were things in transition that required space and silence. She kept showing up on Saturdays. She braided Haun's hair. She brought a goosey soup one afternoon and taught the little girl to say thank you in Yoruba. Haun learned it immediately and used it constantly and with tremendous satisfaction. One evening Nam Jae-won came home to find Susan and Haun on the balcony watching the city lights come on and Haun asleep against Susan's shoulder and Susan sitting very still so as not to disturb her. He stood in the doorway and looked at them for a long moment, and his face did something complicated and private that he did not try to hide. He came and sat beside them. He said nothing. Susan said nothing. Haun snored very quietly. It is done, he said eventually, quietly enough not to disturb his daughter. As of today, the transfer is complete. The agreements are signed. It is done. Susan looked at him. Are you safe? Yes. He looked out at the city. For the first time in a very long time, yes. She reached over and put her hand over his on the armrest. He turned his hand over and held hers. They sat like that while the city lit up below them, Haun breathing softly between them, and Seoul spreading out in every direction, and it was quiet in a way that felt different from other quiet. It felt like something settling, like something deciding to stay. A few months later, on a Saturday morning, she arrived to find the apartment full of the smell of jjajangmyeon, which Haun had apparently decided she was going to cook all by herself, and which had gone partially wrong in a way that involved a great deal of black bean paste on the counter and a very determined 7-year-old insisting it was still edible. Susan gently took over, and together they fixed the sauce, and by the time Nam Jae-won appeared from his morning run the kitchen smelled extraordinary and Haun was taking full credit. After breakfast, after Haun drifted off to her room with her drawing things, he asked Susan to come onto the balcony. She went. The city was bright and clear. He turned to face her, and he was holding something small in his hand. I have been thinking about how to do this, he said. I do not do things simply, but I have been trying to learn. She looked at the small box. Her heart did something it had not done in years. It lifted. Haun knows, he said. She has opinions, as you might expect. She said to tell you that she already thinks of you as her person and that the ring is just the official part. He paused. She is not wrong. Susan looked at him. This man who had walked in on her knees on a bathroom floor and looked at her like she was the most interesting thing he had ever seen. This man who had looked up her medical condition before she ever said a word, quietly, without fanfare, because he wanted to understand. This man who had dismantled an empire because his daughter deserved a father who was not afraid. This man standing in the Seoul morning light, holding a small box and looking at her with that dark, steady gaze that had undone her since the very beginning. Nam Jae-won, she said. Susan Adeyemi, he said. Yes, she said, before he could even finish asking. Yes. Haun, who had absolutely been listening from the doorway, erupted into the balcony and attached herself to both of them at once. And they stood there, the three of them tangled together above the city, and Susan thought about the kitchen in Lagos and the doctor who could not look her in the eye, and Michael's face across the table, and two boys on a video screen asking when she was coming home. And she thought about the stone she had carried sewn into the lining of her coat, and she understood that it was still there. It would always be there in some form, but it was lighter now. It was lighter because she was not carrying it alone anymore. They were married 6 months later. Small and warm, families on both sides. Her sons flying in from Lagos with their father's grudging permission and standing very seriously in their good clothes and letting Haun boss them around, which they submitted to with the patience of boys who had learned that smaller children often simply needed to be allowed to be in charge for a little while. Susan's mother was there, which was everything. Nam Jae-won's mother sat in the front row looking at Susan for most of the ceremony with an expression that had started as reservation and moved, by the vows, to something that might have been gratitude. Haun gave a speech. She stood on a chair and held the microphone with both hands and said, Susan was the cleaning lady, but she cleaned more than the apartment. She cleaned the sad parts. She said it with complete seriousness, and everyone in the room either laughed or cried or did both at once. And Nam Jae-won, standing beside his new wife, looked at his daughter with the particular expression of a man who has been completely defeated by love and does not mind at all. That night, when the guests were gone and Haun was asleep and the penthouse was quiet and theirs, Susan stood on the balcony looking out at Seoul and heard him come up behind her. He put his arms around her and rested his chin against her temple, and they stood there looking at the city that had brought them together in the strangest possible way. I have something to tell you, she said. He waited. The doctor says the baby is due in February. She felt him go very still behind her. I wanted to tell you properly, not in the middle of everything today. He did not speak for a long moment. When he did, his voice was different, softer than she had ever heard it. February. February. He turned her around gently and looked at her face, and whatever he found there made something happen in his expression that she had never seen before and knew she would remember for the rest of her life. He pressed his forehead against hers. The doctor says everything is fine, she said softly. The treatment means the transmission risk is essentially zero. They will monitor closely. It will be fine. I know, he said. I know it will. He pulled her close. I looked it up, he said, and she laughed, which she had not expected to do, and he laughed too, quietly, against her hair, and they stood there above the city laughing softly together in the dark. She had come to Seoul with 2 bags and a secret and a life that had been folded up and handed back to her like something that did not fit anymore. She had come here trying to become invisible, trying to be small enough that the world would not notice her and therefore could not hurt her again. She had scrubbed floors and cleaned showers and carried the weight of what she was alone because she had learned, the hard way, that love came with conditions she could not always meet. And then a door had opened, and a man had looked at her, and nothing about it had been simple or safe or without cost. But it had been real. He had promised her real, and he had delivered real, in all its inconvenient, complicated, beautiful entirety. She was still here. She was still well. She was allowed to want things. She had wanted this, and this was what she had. If you enjoyed the story, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more.